All right, now, everybody. Quiet, listen to me. We're going to start a show. Now, some of you people have been with me before. You know it's going to be a tough grind, but we're going to have a show.
So excited to have Kim in the mix.
Kim, how are you?
And Albert is here as well.
Albert, thank you.
I am more excited about having you here wherever you are. We are a live show, 2 to 4 in the East, 11 to 1 in the West, and across this great globe. We welcome you. If you're taking us in delay, that's the way most people check us out, is they watch the show in delay. So whenever you are watching, we greet you and thank you. I will get to a lot of stuff today. We have David Katz, the esteemed former federal prosecutor, joining us. He'll talk about something that just happened, breaking news. This is, of course, something that was foretold in the book of the Mark Thompson Show, that the idea that you would offer buyouts across the board to the federal workforce without having any kind of appropriations meetings or any kind of appropriations clearance by Congress to appropriate that money and approve that program is patently illegal and can't go forward. And that's what a judge has just said. We'll talk to, as I mentioned, David Katz about that and more. I mean, the courts are busy essentially road testing all of the stuff that this new administration is doing. They are gathering everybody they can. I mean, the Musk thing is wild. You know, he picks up these 19-year-olds that he plays Fortnite with, and he goes into the Treasury Department, and they literally log on and connect with Treasury Department computers. And now, this is crazy. Now we get this new announcement from the Trump administration saying, don't worry, we've decided that we're just going to have 2 of these 19-year-olds in the Treasury Department, and they're going to be read-only. So they're not going to be able to, go in and change anything. I mean, prior to this, as you know, they put this stuff on private servers. There is every bit of evidence that there was manipulation of these computer systems during the time they first entered the Treasury Department and today. But now what we're hearing is, don't worry, those 19 to 25-year-olds, Elon's buddies, with no prior security clearance or vetting, they're just going to be read-only. Hey, dude, this is the most sensitive information pertaining to taxpayers and businesses in America and beyond that exists in terms of private information for Americans who interact with the government and pay and receive money from the Treasury. You're telling me that I should relax? Those 19-year-olds are just read-only? Who the F are they? Where are they in government?
God, Mark, why are you so uptight about it all?
What is their background that in any way deputizes them to even be read-only? I don't care if they're read-only. They shouldn't be in the goddamn building. It's outrageous. Absolutely outrageous. And yet, we look at this read-only. Oh, guys, it's read-only. Oh, good. Oh, it's read-only. Great. Then I'll just have a cocktail, and you'll let me know how and when they decide on what changes there should be. Absolutely wild. Anyway, Pamela Kirby will talk me off the ledge. Here she is with a super chat. Can we just shout from the mountaintop in 2028, repeal Citizens United and get money and lobbyists out of our elections? Please get an expert to help facilitate it on your show. I'm ready to work on that. Well, Pamela Kirby, thank you. I would say, first of all, thank you for the super chat. I would say that, sadly, money in politics is one of the truly pernicious aspects of American politics, and it is baked into American politics largely now because of what you've noted, the Citizens United decision out of the Supreme Court. And there's so many now vested interests, big money vested interests associated with just what you're saying, money influencing political policy. And, look at what happened with J.D. Vance. I mean, J.D. Vance is a Peter Thiel draft pick, okay? He went to Peter Thiel's companies, finance companies, didn't do particularly well there, moved from one to the next. Then Thiel drafted him to be in a Senate race that Thiel dropped $15 million into. Then following that victory, because you can't stand up if you're an opponent to $15 million, Thiel was plucked to be vice president to Donald Trump's presidency.
And really, what has he done? Like, he's a big nothing burger. Where is he? He's just kind of standing idly by, doing nothing, saying nothing. Well, meanwhile, it's Musk who's really the top deputy.
Yeah, to be fair, that's usually what vice presidents do. That's very old school, that he would be doing very little. But you're right. I mean, Musk has ascended to the number one spot. I mean, you could even suggest that in terms of changing government, Musk is more of a president than Trump is. It's all kind of scary. But just to Pamela's point, it was money that brought J.D. Vance into the scene. That's why I use him as an example. And you know who I'll bring on, who's actually begun and slayed a few dragons in relation to what you're talking about, which is trying to get money out of politics, Pamela? I'll bring on Cenk Uygur from TYT. They actually did put together a coalition of states and a real movement to try to get money out of politics. I think it was called Wolfpack. And you should give it a look, because I know we all can agree that it's a bad thing that money is so dominant in politics, and now money has been viewed by the Supreme Court as speech. That's how it really got through. And there it is, the Wolfpack. There's an emergency in America. Corruption and special interests have a stranglehold on Congress. So I refer you to them if you really want to do something. I truly think that they are making a difference. And, TYT takes a lot of incoming fire. I don't agree with everything that they do or say, but they really are, I think, in the main, doing really great heavy lifting. And I again, think that on some level, sadly, America is a capitalist nation, and the perversion of capitalism into the politics has now been baked in, so that big money interests are so very much a part of our politics. I don't know that it can be changed, but Wolfpack and Cenk's work is maybe a place you could start. So I'll invite him on the show too to discuss that a little bit and discuss other things. Cenk's always an entertainer and a smart guy. So
the Mark Thompson Show.
There was a golden beeper that was given to Donald Trump.
That's fun.
By Israel's Benjamin Netanyahu. The golden beeper is a callback, isn't it, Kim?
Yes. Remember all the beepers that exploded?
Yes.
Yes. I think the golden beeper was a celebration of that operation.
September of 2024, Israel exploded hundreds of pagers and other devices used by members of the Iranian-backed Hezbollah militia group in Lebanon and Syria. There it is, the golden beeper. Most of you will find it in your gift bags on the way out of the party.
I wonder if the Secret Service had to really look at that thing before they handed it to Trump.
That's a good question, right? Do they vet the stuff that
inactive,
he gets?
Right.
The golden beeper gift was lost in the Riviera of the Middle East talk that Donald Trump was riffing about in his post-meeting remarks with Benjamin Netanyahu. But it's one of a kind, everybody. So if you're looking for it on, in Trump world, because I know you have the sneakers and you probably have the What are the other things that they have? The merch, Albert. What do they have? They've got the Bibles, of course. Yeah, the Bibles, the sneakers. These you've got, of course, the coin. You know, and don't forget your crypto. And if you wanted to add to your collection with the golden beeper, I'm sorry, it is not. Yeah, it's not a consumer item. It was a special gift from Netanyahu to Trump. So,
The Mark Thompson Show.
I am curious about how things are going when it comes to Elon Musk. I mean, here is the guy, richest guy in the world. He's involved in a lot of countries. It may not seem as though he'd have time because he's so busy effing with ours, but he is involved with Germany. He's involved with the European Union in different ways. And he even has connections to Russia. You know, he was on the phone to Russia, as you're aware, during the Ukraine war and actually turned off Starlink during that confrontation for a time as a favor to Putin. I mean, I surmise it's a favor to Putin. You talked to Putin and you turned off Starlink at a critical time in the war when the Ukrainians needed it. I mean, the only person and the only interest it was serving was Vladimir Putin's. But anyway, back to Elon Musk. He's come in heavy. You know, he comes in hot. And as we mentioned, his 19 to 25-year-olds have infiltrated, invaded, and moved into government and excitedly have begun to dismantle things. Musk himself involved in drafting that offer to government workers to take that buyout. This, by the way, I think is the last day you can take that buyout. But as we also mentioned to you just minutes ago, a judge has blocked that buyout for now. And it's not like nobody took that buyout. A bunch of people did, right, Kim? I don't know what the numbers are, but I saw
about
it was
50,000.
Yeah, I mean, tens of thousands of government workers took it.
They say it was offered to 2 million and about 50,000 people said yes.
I mean, you know, good luck getting your money, I'd say. You know, if somebody said, hey, man, I want to take this, I would say, hey, man, you may want to make sure that there's actual money there. This is a kind of off-the-rails offer approved by no one, just hatched overnight. The interesting thing, and I did mention, you know, what he's doing at the Treasury Department, and of course how he's single-handedly, I'd suggest, closing down USAID. You know, USAID, and we mentioned it the other day, it does important work and really helps a lot of depressed and underserved and destitute communities around the world. It does, if you will, extend the reach of America in all the, generally speaking, righteous ways that you'd like to see America's image represented across the world. You know, as we deal arms to various countries, as we're involved in confrontations worldwide, and it's kind of the worst of America, if you will, how we're kind of sticking our finger in so many pots. USAID isn't that. USAID is, in general, more associated with humanitarian relief, and as I say, with the better parts of what you'd like to think America is about. But Musk somehow saw USAID as wasteful and as something that he wanted to shut down. And the other thing I would just say is, you know, when it comes to the navel gazing that might be associated with a lot of U.S. government offices, like they're overblown, there's too much of a bureaucracy. I mean, you can make that argument across the board, but USAID actually operates on a fairly lean budget. I mean, I think it's 1% of the overall budget. And the other thing they do is they really do stuff. Like they're not the navel gazers. They're not the policy wonks. They're the actual doers. So if you want policy wonks and you want, you know, some of that stuff that I think is sort of classic stereotypical government, maybe you go to the State Department, maybe you go to the Department of Commerce, and there might be places along the way there, but it's hard. I mean, it's a complicated world and a nation full of nuance, and it takes a complicated, nuanced government to handle it all. So while there might be candidates for cuts, I don't see USAID as one of them. And again, I see them doing real work out there in the world. So the beauty of what Musk is doing from his standpoint, the thing that he probably likes, is that no one really knows what USAID is. Mm-hmm. And they just go, oh, it's foreign aid. Okay, yeah, get rid of that. You know, it's America first, man. You know, I don't want to cut checks that affect other countries anymore. I want to cut checks to our people. Well, again, that is just a shallow understanding of what USAID does. USAID was born out of the Feed the World campaign by the pop singers of the 80s and Farm Aid, sponsored by the country rock stars of today, says Stepping Stone Media Group, LLC. I didn't know that, and I must tell you, I don't think that's true. But it might be. I always take a meeting. I always take a meeting with you. You might be right about that. But if you could, I think USAID has been around since the 60s.
Google it.
All right, check it out. Somebody will do it. It helps AIDS patients with medication. You cut off USAID, and those people will die without those meds. That's certainly true. I mean, it also involves famine relief and all the rest. So I do think the idea that he went after that does have something to do, I'm guessing, with some, if you will, it may have something to do with some kind of personal grievance, and you never should discount that with Elon Musk. There are a lot of personal grievances he has with the U.S. government, and the other thing I'd suggest is it's only the beginning. Here you go. John Watson says, my favorite part of the U.S. government is the National Park Service. I'm dreading what is going to happen to them if Trump and Musk ever get around to it. Well, they've already begun to get around to that. The U.S. Park Service very much could be part of this reorganization and leaning out of the U.S. government. It's interesting, though, that in all of this, Musk's greed is unlimited, says Full of Nonsense. The richest man in the world is looting our treasury and aid programs. He is certainly running amok. And I will say this about Musk.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Yeah, Jules T. says U.S. aid was from the 60s. Yeah, exactly. I'm really very certain of that. But I note today that Elon Musk is losing popularity with the American public. As he wields more authority this is from Morning Consult, as a, quote, special government employee in Donald Trump's new government, the tech billionaire has started to wear out his welcome with the American electorate. For the first time since tracking began in November, more voters disapprove than approve of Musk's appointment to lead the unofficial Department of Government Efficiency. It's 46% who disapprove to 41% of those who approve. It marks a 10-point decline in net approval of Trump's decision to elevate him, with most of the movement materializing since Trump took office on January 20th. So as you look at what Musk is doing, note that he's becoming a little bit of an encumbrance, a little bit of a weight on Trump. How do voters feel about the executive actions of Donald Trump? Rehiring U.S. military service members who were discharged for refusing to take the COVID-19 vaccine during the pandemic. Only 26% disapprove of that. You get to the real disapproval when you get down to eliminating birthright citizenship, which, of course, the court has thrown out. We'll talk about that with David Katz. Eliminating the asylum process, which allows undocumented immigrants fleeing danger in their home countries to legally remain in the U.S. That's close. 40% disapprove of eliminating that asylum program. Banning transgender Americans from serving in the U.S. military. Do more Americans, these are registered voters, approve or disapprove of banning transgender Americans from serving in the U.S. military? If you guessed more disapprove of that policy of banning transgender Americans, you're right.
Wow, I'm surprised.
Yeah, me too. 45% to 41%, with 14% undecided. Pardoning of the J6ers. Roughly 1,500 January 6 rioters were pardoned. Do more respondents in this poll approve or disapprove? Disapproval by 51% of those polled.
Should be way more.
It should be, yes. And here's another one that I thought was an extraordinary early move on the part of Trump. I don't know why he did it. And that's eliminating the Biden administration policy that was designed to lower the price of prescription drugs. No, that is something that all these guys run on, right? We're going to lower the price of prescription drugs. Well, Trump early on eliminated that victory that Biden had to lower the price of prescription medications, and 52% disapprove of that. So again, these are all registered voters. Margin of error is about 2%. And you see that from a policy standpoint, Trump is treading the line. It kind of is along the lines of his victory, which was also razor thin. But I'd suggest that Musk is losing ground with the American public. There was another poll on Musk. I think it was done by The Economist. And
it's an Economist YouGov poll. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. And it also shows, it's taken in the days after the 2024 election, 47% of surveyed Republicans say they wanted to see Musk with a lot of influence over the new administration. 29% wanted just a little influence. This is in the days immediately following the election. But now the numbers come out a bit differently. 51% of Americans perceive Musk as having a lot of influence on the Trump administration, according to this February poll. 78% Democrats, 41% of independents, 35% of Republicans. Americans have less favorable views of Trump and Vice President Vance than they did in the last week's poll conducted after their first week in office. Musk, his influence, again, agreed to be, by many, too great or quite significant. I'm trying to wade through with all these.
I think it went from 47% wanted him to have a lot of influence down to 26% now want him to have a lot of influence. That's a humongous drop.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sorry, but this is just blasted by pop-up ads. I can barely read it. Survey Democrats and independents are also showing less desire from Musk, they note here. But as Kim has just passed along, that's exactly right. They want Musk to have a lot of influence. That group of people has shrunk from the 40s to 26%. Yeah.
Can I just raise a point about regret? No regrets. About people who voted for Trump and who were, I don't mean the rabid Trumpers at the rallies, but people who thought, yeah, this is all going to be great. And you wonder, when they look at what's happening and all the crazy things he's trying to do, if they have regrets and they're thinking, oh my gosh, this is, what they were saying about Project 2025 all seems real. And if they're having regrets, and I think I figured out how they kind of make this okay in their mind. And it's this comment from Delwood Kelp, who says, seems no one here, including Mark, dispute Trump signing the bill to keep men from participating in women's sports. Oh, don't bring that one up, he says, because the audience actually agrees with Trump. So you pick on this one little thing and you ignore everything else. Maybe that's how they're justifying it in their mind.
Well, there are a lot of single issue voters. They voted on immigration. They voted on, they might have voted on this trans thing. They made a big deal out of that trans thing. Delwood, I haven't mentioned the trans thing because your boy, Trump, and his boyfriend, Musk, are so busy trashing government. And
exactly.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't get to, your pet project, which is to drive trans people to take their own lives or whatever the hell you guys want. It's disgusting. This is like such a minuscule part of the American population. Yes. It is offensive to me that they could be singled out this way. It's just gross. It really is. So if you really want to get into the trans athletes, let's actually look at how many trans athletes compete in women's sports. It's bullshit. Okay? Mm-hmm. You can run on it, you can win on it, and then guys like you, Del, would go, yeah, that's right. Get those guys out of women's sports. it's crap, man. You know it's crap. It doesn't affect anybody. But it puts additional pressure on a community that's already in crisis, which is the trans community. I don't know a lot about the trans community, but I know one thing. There are not a lot of people, and they don't deserve the kind of abuse and singling out that this administration has grandstanded around with the signing of that. So you wanted me to spend a second on it? There, I spent a second on it. Now let's get on to some stuff that really matters.
They want to ship undocumented migrants to Gitmo. They want to take over the Gaza area and make it into the Mediterranean resort of the Middle East. And they're looting the treasury. Oh, but let's talk about trans athletes? Really?
Yeah, thank you. It's
The Mark Thompson Show.
Greg Palast is coming along in a moment. We'll talk about voter suppression in America, and I will ask him about some of the pushback that he's gotten on his numbers. So we'll talk about that. Luis with a super chat. Check it out. How about a $5 super chat? Which of Dumbito Mussolini's proposed land grabs is the most idiotic? Canada, Greenland, Gaza Strip, Panama Canal? Hashtag what a dumbass. Yeah, it's hard to keep up with it all. I will say this. Hard to keep up with it. So maybe that's why we didn't get to certain stuff, Delwood. We're busy dealing with Greenland and Panama, and I want to rename the Gulf of Mexico. Trevor Starr in Hollywood says Trump and Musk et al. Don't care about approval ratings at this point. They've got their power, and they'll do whatever they want to destroy the country and make themselves even richer. I generally agree, except I will tell you, if history is a guide, Trump does care about how stuff is going over on the street. And yeah, he plays to his MAGA faithful, but he doesn't completely ignore how things are playing on the street. Look, take the freeze. One of the first things they did, freeze all government spending. And there was such pushback and such a hue and cry. And I understand it wasn't all from the street. It was from politics and politicians and pundits as well. But the street had a lot to do with it. And they unfroze the freeze during the same 24-hour period. Noah Marie Clarity says, Noe here with your reminder to call and email your House representative and state senators. Your call matters. And a good way to utilize is to write a script with a coherent, action-oriented message. That's true. And Noe has done this. Noe Marie has actually, she sent me an email kind of detailing something that she sent to Adam Schiff, and Schiff responded. But the calls matter as well. I mean, you do have to make your voice heard one way or the other. So I think that's a really good prescription for moving ahead. Vilma says, it seems that this new administration is more focused on dismantling our government than making the lives of Americans better. Well, of course, you're right. Vilma, who is an OG of the show, she was with us from the very beginning. I will not only say that they're concerned with dismantling, but this is a very Project 2025 strategic layout that they're following almost to the letter. And the guy who is key in authoring Project 2025 will run the Office of Management and Budget. He's going through confirmation votes, I think, right now. And Russell Vought's his name, Vought. And the idea is to eliminate funding for a lot of government programs, eliminate the administrative state, the bureaucracy. But the reality is this is not a business like Twitter or like any of these other tech bro businesses that they've hatched. The American government doesn't always make money on stuff. We lose money on things. We're a wealthy nation, and we can afford to lose money on things that lift up our population. And there are many parts of American policy that require investment. So not everything in America pencils out as a moneymaker. So you bring these CEOs in who think they understand government because they had built a successful business. And by the way, I'll just mention as an aside, one of the reasons Elon Musk has any success is because of what? Because the American government grants him immense tax breaks, and also state government grants him immense tax breaks, and he has huge contracts with the American government. So, I mean, if you want to look at him as a successful CEO, I think you can play both sides of that argument. It may be a closer call than you think. But in any case, all of these guys who feel themselves successful in business, we have to bring a businessman's philosophy, a CEO's philosophy to U.S. government. That's just not the right approach. It's the right approach in some ways, but it is woefully short in terms of really understanding how governance works at the federal level. Susan W., I'm blown away.
Are you going to cry?
I'm not going to cry. I'm not going to cry. I'm not going to cry, but I'm close.
A little bit. Just a little bit.
I'm not going to cry. I'm not going to cry.
Susan W. has given us $100, $99.99. Love your rants, she says. I love it. Well, I love you. How do you do it? Like, is that the way you do it, Kim? How do the kids do it?
Yeah, that's good. You make your thumb should be a little pointier.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
More
that's
like
a
that.
good little T Swift heart you got there. Good job.
Very, very good. Anyway,
nice.
Susan, you're so generous. We so thank you, and I very much appreciate you being here. Spencer Jaffe with a $50 super sticker. Wow.
Big shout
out to both of you. Man, Spencer, you are really cool. Spencer, another OG of the show. RJ Dunn, keep the fire alive. Mark and team, thank you, RJ. Appreciate the 20. We are a crowd-funded show, so it really matters. And RJ, you are with us, and Pamela Kirby is as well. Thanks, Mark. I look forward to checking that out. All right. Give me a 20-second break here, and then I will bring on a guy who has done such great investigative reporting. We'll talk about voter suppression, and I'll ask him about his math and how it all works, and essentially, did Kamala Harris actually win that election if you were able to eliminate all the voter suppression that went down? Greg Palast joins us next.
The Mark Thompson Show.
It was great. I loved it.
How would you handle this? We could try ignoring it, sir.
Morning.
You cannot say you love your country.
Where are my weed smokers at?
Stay at home and get baked.
Right on, everybody. Glad you could be with us. Thursday, the next hour, we'll bring on federal prosecutor, the former federal prosecutor, David Katz. Now he's a defense attorney. And there's much to talk about in terms of the illegality that's being perpetrated at the government level with Trump and his minions, with Musk, et cetera. There was an 11th hour stay on the part of this latest move. The judge involved in the case with the buyouts of federal workers has already weighed in on that. So there's a lot to talk about when we get to that. I'm very excited about this guy joining us. I've been a fan of his for so very long. His book, which is called, I think, The Best Democracy Money Can Buy, is a great read. It's a quick read, too. It's not like a huge tome, but, man, it's solid. So you should definitely check it out. In fact, we'll put a link to it underneath this video. His latest film, documentary, is brilliant. It's called Vigilantes, Inc., and it discusses the high art and the aggressive way in which so many voters are disenfranchised and pulled off the voter rolls in so many key states, swing states. Here he is now with a follow-up. Greg Palast, everybody. So, what's the reality, Greg? The numbers, when we talked to you, they were just beginning to come in. Now, Vigilantes, yes, Inc. suggests that there are, potentially millions of votes. What are the realities?
Okay, I'm not guessing, Mark. I'm a numbers guy. If you're watching me instead of listening, you'll see I have a fedora, which means I am a real, true investigative reporter. I was the chief investigative reporter on these issues on vote suppression issues for the Guardian newspapers out of London and BBC television. So I'm mainstream outside my own country. But the main thing you need to know about me is that before I was a journalist, I spent a couple decades as what's called a forensic economist. That means a detective who's good with numbers. I work for the United States Justice Department and most of the attorney generals around the U.S. doing calculations, doing statistical calculations. These are the T statistics, by the way, at Indiana U. So this is hard numbers I'm going to give you.
And by the way, this is important because I think that the statistics can be overwhelming. So I am comforted by the fact that you're used to wading through all this stuff.
Yes, and by the way, these numbers are what I'll be taking into a federal court. I get cross-examined by all the vote snatchers and all the Trump's guys. They get to cross-examine me, go through my numbers. So I can't take any chances with being wrong. In fact, what I do, these are government numbers. So let me give you the bottom line here. If it weren't for what we politely call vote suppression tactics, because vote suppression is one of those kind of New York Times-y phrases that means shafting Black people, Hispanics, Asian Americans out of their vote. Voters of color, when they are knocked, one of the horrible, nasty little secrets of America's democracy is that we don't count all the votes that are cast, and we don't let every American citizen vote. We're the only major democracy. I've been covering elections for BBC in England, France, Liberia, Venezuela, Argentina, you name it, Brazil. There's no other nation that plays these games with ballots that considers itself a democracy. I mean, I'm not talking about Russia or Saudi Arabia here, okay? So here's the bottom line, Mark. If it weren't for these vote suppression tricks and trickery, Kamala Harris would have won an additional 3,565,000 votes. That would have put her ahead in the popular vote by over 1 million against Trump. More important in our system, she would have won Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Georgia, giving her 286 electoral votes and the presidency. Now, again, where does Greg Palast get these numbers? They're not, okay, the first thing, I'm going to tell you what it isn't. No, Elon Musk did not change the voting machines from outer space. Take off your tinfoil hat. That's one thing that didn't happen. Okay, now, what did happen is that, and again, 3.5 million votes that were lost to Harris through these tricks. Where do they come from? From the United States Elections Assistance Commission, which is our official government agency, which tracks not only the votes cast, but the votes that are not counted. Again, it's all these numbers are kind of hidden in plain sight. So in the year before the election, the voter rolls were purged. That is, we literally crossed people's names off the voter rolls. And this is the official government number, 4,776,706 voters, about 5 million voters, were knocked off the voter rolls without any good reason. There was no damn reason to take those 5 million voters off the roll.
Now, stop right there, because in your movie, which I recommend, Vigilantes, Inc., you actually go into a little bit of this process, that is to say, how that can happen, how you can remove 4 million. But for those who haven't seen the film yet, can you just describe in summary, if you will, the ways in which you could remove that huge number of voters from the voter rolls?
Well, let's start with just the state of Georgia, which removed several 100,000 voters from the voter rolls before the election. I went through the list of voters who were removed from the voter rolls for the ACLU of Georgia and the NAACP and Rainbow Push. We went into federal court. I provided a technical report, literally went through every single purged name with the experts from Amazon, thank you, and with the experts from the United States Postal Service. They know where, between Amazon and the Postal Service, they do know where you live. These people were accused of not living at their voting addresses. We were able to give the state the name and address of 198,000 of those voters whose only crime was voting while Black. But according to Amazon and the Postal Service, those people live exactly at their legal voting address. And there was no reason to remove those voters except because there was a partisan attack on voters of color. It's no joke. Again, I have the names and addresses of all 198,000. And if you watch the film, you'll see me in front of a polling station in Atlanta where Black people are being shoved away. You can't vote here anymore, including a 92-year-old woman in a walker named Christine Jordan. This is just by accident. I happened to be there at the Atlanta polling station. 92-year-old woman in a walker is thrown out into a storm, by the way. Her granddaughter's hysterical. Been voting at the same place for 50 years. They said, can't vote here anymore. You don't live in Georgia. I went down the street to her home And there on the wall was a picture of this woman 50 years earlier at that same house having dinner with her cousin, Martin Luther King.
Yeah, it's a great moment in the film.
And this woman, so these are the people they're knocking off. That's just the main way. That's number one, the massive purges which occurred in Wisconsin. I also did a technical report in Wisconsin, again, going through every name. And who was on that list? I actually mapped it with the help of the Washington Post, by the way. I actually mapped it so that we showed that every single voter wrongly removed, almost every single one, came out of a black precinct in Milwaukee or a student precinct with student housing in Madison, Wisconsin. That's how Trump won Wisconsin this time when he didn't win it last time. Because last time in 2020, with the legal action by Black Voters Matter Fund, we were able to stop the purge. This time we couldn't because it became a more GOP heavy, their elections board. So that's how Trump won Wisconsin this time, was through purging black voters in Milwaukee, students in Madison. Georgia was won by purging black voters in and Asian American voters they really went after in Georgia. That's just beginning. Yeah.
Do you have an answer for so many in the chat who are asking? Certainly Kamala Harris has access to some of these numbers. She has access to Greg Palast. She has some understanding of what you're talking about. Why did none of the Kamala people ask for a recount or demand any kind of changes? Why didn't they respond to this obvious evidence that you'd point to?
Well, first of all, why don't Democrats stand up? The same reason jellyfish don't. You have to have a spine to be able to be erect. But I have to tell you inside that Jesse Jackson met with Kamala Harris and Joe Biden and the president and at the time, and gave them copies of the film and said, you got to watch this, but more important, you got to do something about it. Now, they did a little bit. They hired a guy, Mark Elias, a very good attorney. And there you see on the screen, Vigilantes, Inc. There's the film, which you can, again, download or stream for free at gregpalast.com. Thank you, care of, thanks, Jamie Foxx and Leonardo DiCaprio. And so so Jesse Jackson said, watch the film, but more important, do something about it. But it's very difficult. Democratic Party, don't ever expect a political party to save your vote. Like I say, I work with ACLU. I work with nonpartisan organizations because they care about your vote, not who you vote for, but whether you get your vote counted. So NAACP, Black Voters Matter Fund, Rainbow Push, these are the organizations that if you want to do something about something, that's where you go. And Kamala Harris actually told Reverend Jackson, well, hey, once I'm elected, I'm just going to sign the John Lewis voting rights bill. Hey, lady, you just found out if you don't stop the vote suppression before the election, you ain't getting elected to nothing. And then you can't do anything about this. And again, like after the election, Joe Biden went to NATO and said, we just had an American election proving that America is the greatest democracy in the world and has a perfect voting system. And anyone who says otherwise is undermining our democracy. And all the Europeans were sitting there going, coughing, because they don't remove black voters from the voter rolls in France. They don't do it in England. They don't do it in these other nations. Our NATO allies are horrified by the lack of democracy in America. Because remember, I put my reports at the top of the BBC Nightly News. My reports are all over the tops of the newspapers in Europe, among our NATO allies. They know what's going on. They know that Trump stole this election by removing black voters and getting rid of their votes. And the ugliest thing, let me bring up what I think is the ugliest thing, which you'll find in Vigilantes, Inc. in our film. For the first time since 1946, you had a mass challenge of black voters, not by government officials, but by self-appointed vigilantes. Now you say, what? Okay, on the books in 24 states are old Jim Crow laws, whether it's Mississippi or Iowa or Florida, Georgia, which allows an individual. So Greg Palast can say Mark Thompson should not be allowed to vote. That's all I have to do is I believe that Mark Thompson is not a legal voter. Now, understand, who am I? Who's Greg Palast? The answer is, baby, if you're in Georgia, I can stop Mark Thompson from getting his ballot or having it counted. And
it doesn't matter who you are, or you need no credentials whatsoever.
Yeah, all you have to do is be a voter in someone's county. So, for example, you'll meet in our film Major Gamaliel Turner, the Pentagon's expert on warfare of the future. He lives near Fort Benning. He has a home there for years. And he's assigned out of Fort Benning, Georgia, career military, 70 years old. He was assigned to California base. And he said, and he didn't get his mail-in ballot. He said, where's my FC ballot? He calls up his county elections office in Georgia and says, where's my ballot? They said, Mr. Turner, you've been challenged. He says, what do you mean I've been challenged? They said, no problem. Just come in. And someone challenged you. They didn't say who. It turns out to be Alton Russell, the chairman of the Republican Party in his area. Again, not a government official, a Republican, a party official challenged this black man's right to vote. He said, all you have to do is come in and prove you're a citizen and your address, and we'll let you vote. He says, all I have to do is fly 2,700 miles 2 days before an election to prove I'm an American citizen. Again, remember his father, by the way, Reverend Harold Turner, was the co-founder of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference with Martin Luther King.
Yeah, this is another great beat in the movie. There are a bunch of these great beats in the movie. That's one of them.
But the thing is that this one vigilante, who, by the way, you'll see in the movie, he actually puts on 6 guns and dresses like a vigilante. Okay, he likes to think he's Doc Holliday, the vigilante. So this vigilante, the Republican Party chairman in Columbus, Georgia, he personally challenged 4,000 people. Now, does he know 4,000 people? No. He has no idea who they are. He just got the list from a group called True the Vote, which is a Trump front organization. They're the ones who had that crazy movie 2,000 Mules, which, by the way, Trump launched at Mar-a-Lago. This group created the list of 4,000 names to challenge. The other thing we did is I challenged another challenger, a Republican Party official in Atlanta, Cobb County, named Pam Reardon. She personally, you ready for this, Mark? She personally challenged 32,000 voters in her county. 32,000. I showed her the photos of her black neighbors whose vote she challenged. I said, you know these people? She says, no. Well, he challenged their right to vote. She says, well, I can't call 32,000 people, but you can challenge their right to vote. So this mass challenge, and again, it was last used in 1946 by the Ku Klux Klan.
Yeah,
and that's
these
why
are all
my
Jim
film,
Crow. Yeah, and I just want to say, I thought it's sort of one of the great moments. It's really it's a well woven film, maybe the way I would describe it, because it does start with
story.
Story. It starts with the fact that the South will rise again. Attitude is very much part of the elections and the voter suppression in the South. I want to turn you to the numbers, though, because I'm getting from many, and there has been pushback. Like Greg Palast is using old numbers from 2006 that sort of suggest that there is a multiplier on voter suppression when it comes to people of color and Hispanics, and that no longer applies. It's no longer 900 times more likely. It's more like 2 times more likely to be voter suppressed, that group of people. Yet what I'm seeing from you is actual numbers. Like I don't think you do just use a multiplier. Can you speak to that?
Yes. Okay. So first of all, again, I get the 4,776,706 purged. That's from the United States Elections Assistance Commission. And
that's not a multiplier. You're saying
that's great. Okay. 317,000 people challenged by these vigilantes. Just so you know, that came from the group that did the challenges. They proudly announced 317,886 voters challenged by August. They were aiming for 2 million. 2.12 million mail-in ballots got disqualified. That's, by the way, if you're wondering, you know who gave me that number? National Petroleum Radio, NPR, which did an analysis, a very good analysis. And by the way, they found this year that rejected ballots, that 13.8%, 1 in 7 mail-in ballots are rejected. Now, whose ballots are they? According to the state of Washington. Again, this isn't Greg Palast coming up with this stuff. The state of Washington did an analysis of mail-in ballots rejected. And again, it's 1 in 7. that you're 400% more likely to have your ballot rejected if you're black than if you're white. That study just came out. It's not 2006. I wish it were 2006 and all that were gone. Provisional ballots. The United States Elections Assistance Commission, not Greg Palast, says that 42.3%, a lot of numbers here, all that's about half, close to half of all provisional ballots are rejected. So that would be over 1 million ballots thrown in the dumpster. Now, whose ballots? Again, according to the government, your chance of you being shunted to provisional ballot is 300% more likely if you're black, Hispanic, or Asian American. And how did this happen? We've always had these Jim Crow effects, but why was it worse this year? According to the Brennan Center for Justice at NYU Law School, and they're the best at this stuff, they said that in 30 states, almost all of them red states, 30 states passed laws making it harder for people of color to vote. 30 states in the past 4 years passed laws that are targeted at removing black voters. In one case, we did have one judge, thank God, who actually said, this is so clearly targeted with black people, it's got to go. That was in North Carolina. But for the most part, the courts have said states can do what they want. There's no right to vote in the United States Constitution. That's left up to the states. You have no constitutional right to vote, and that's one of the big problems we have.
I thought it was interesting, too. It's revealed in your film that the revelation that one has that they're not a registered voter, that they're not on the rolls, that they don't have the right to vote, is something that oftentimes isn't discovered till voting day, as you know, in instant after instant. So there's not like they send you something saying you've been challenged. It just is one of those ways in which they can.
Yeah. Now,
they do send you a card, right? They send a postcard.
Right. They send a postcard. However, here's the problem. Number one, the postcard looks like junk mail, and who responds to it? Like my son picks up his mail from school once a semester. If you see a piece of junk mail, you have to respond. The response rate in Georgia to these postcards, they call them the poison postcards. They send you a postcard, you don't respond, you lose your vote. The response rate is 1.2%, literally not much better than 1 in 100 voters get these cards. Now, here's the other problem. The challenge law in Georgia was changed to allow challenges the day before the election, the day of the election, the day after the election. Now, you'll get your postcard, but 30 days after the election, Donald Trump was certified. It doesn't matter if you get a notice. So they'll count your ballot. They will count your ballot, but after the inauguration.
How many of those Georgia voters, asks Randy, were challenged? How many of those Georgia voters who were challenged eventually voted in the 2024 election, Randy's asking?
Okay, so there's two groups. There's those who never got their ballot and didn't get to vote. There's those who, if you got your ballot, mailed it in, you don't know that it was challenged and you didn't vote. According to the president of the NAACP, Gerald Griggs, he was looking at 200,000 challenges in just Georgia alone. Now, in 2020, where they took the challenge for a test drive, GOP operatives, and I'm not being partisan because it just happens that every one of them was a white GOP operative, challenged 180,000 voters. It broke way over that in 2024. The biggest problem that Biden was able to win Georgia in 2020 because a lot of voting officials, including Republicans, I will say, rejected these challenges. However, for 2024, they changed the law, making it very, very difficult for local officials to say these challenges are bogus. They have to accept the challenges. And if the voter doesn't challenge the challenge, and 99% have no idea that they've been challenged. Major Turner was lucky that he called and said, where's my ballot? And again, he had to go to federal court, by the way, to get his one vote challenge. And so we're trying to get from the state of Georgia right now the final number of challenges and the final number of challenge ballots, which were and were not counted. But you have to, one thing I want to warn you about, the states are stonewalling us on these numbers. We are the only nation, the only nation in the OECD, which is what we call the advanced world. The only nation which disqualifies ballots, which allows these voter challenges, and which keeps the vote total secret. Go ahead, try to find out how many ballots were disqualified, how many people were purged and challenged. You have to, again, tease out these numbers out of government files, but a lot of them are still missing. I'm worried that that with Trump in, while the United States Elections Assistance Commission is supposed to get full numbers, I suspect we won't ever get those numbers because the states aren't going to provide the numbers to the feds, and they by law they actually don't have to provide the numbers. So we keep these numbers secret. So I have to go through. I had to actually sue the state of Georgia in federal court to get purge numbers.
Yeah, and this is a system that does work to the advantage of the party in power, and so you have a real uphill climb to get this stuff. I'm seeing in the why is the True the Vote and Eagle AI not being sued? Dennis is asking.
They have been sued. Two things. Number one, where was the Justice Department? Where was the Justice Department? And that's a problem. So NAACP, Rainbow Push, all these groups have filed suits. In fact, Fair Fight Georgia, Stacey Abrams' group sued True the Vote for interference in election interference.
That's in her gubernatorial. Was that
no? This was after this election coming in.
Okay.
So Stacey Abrams, after she left office, again, she's another one shafted out of her election. But after she left off, after she lost her governor's race, she set up an organization, Fair Fight, which does bring these suits. But they were not successful because the problem is that you have a Trump court. 1/3 of all appellate judges are Trump appointees. And so the courts have taken the position there's no right to vote in the Constitution. Therefore, all you can do, they defer to the states. It's up to the states to determine whether you get to vote and how you get to vote. Now, it used to be that we had the Voting Rights Act, but remember in 2013, that was gutted by the U.S. Supreme Court. That was a real blow if you want to bring litigation. But again, I went into court with NAACP and others, but it's murder to win in court action. We do win sometimes. We have with a campaign I ran with Rainbow Push, Indivisible, and some other groups, we were able to kill off a vote suppression trick called interstate crosscheck, which had knocked out almost 1 million voters of color. We got that killed off, but it's like whack-a-mole. You kill off like this thing called interstate crosscheck, which with the ACLU we were able to get to shut it down. And then they come up with these vigilante Ku Klux Klan style challenges.
Well, these challenges that you described, these vigilante challenges, are just bone-numbingly awful. I mean, it's just it's insane. You lay it all out there in Vigilantes Inc. But what I really wanted to get to, and we get some of it in our chat today, is that these are hard numbers you have. These are not. You're not looking at a small sample size and then multiplying it times some kind of existing understanding about how many.
Right. In some cases, we have to use statistical corrections. And one of the big things I have to do is that there's a lot of, you will notice in all the numbers I gave you, like 4.7 million purged, a couple million challenged, 2 million mail-in ballots disqualified, et cetera. If you add it all up, it's way more than 3.5 million. But I'm taking out all the double counting. I'm taking out the fact that a lot of Hispanic men voted for Donald Trump. So you don't want to double count. You want to be very careful. You want to make some adjustments to make sure that you're not overstating. The Jim Crow effect is bad enough at 3.5 million.
You don't need to plant evidence at that crime scene. Exactly.
No. Right. It's real bad. And my fellow journalists, come on, this stuff is sitting there for you to do. If NPR could do an analysis saying 1 in 7 ballots are thrown in the garbage, mail-in ballots are thrown in the garbage, why don't you tell us what the effect was on an election? They never go back after an election and say, remember we told you about voter IDs, long lines, provisional ballots. I mean, New York Times ran a story about provisional ballots or mail-in. They ran a story on mail-in ballots, and my number, 2.2 million mail-in ballots thrown in the garbage. According to MIT, my number is way low. Massachusetts Institute of Technology did a report carried in the Times, and they said it was far, far higher than that. So I'm trying to be as conservative as possible, and maybe someone else has different numbers. Great. Again, I'm always happy. I am a statistician by training, an economist, and so I'm more than happy to get suggestions on how to sharpen these numbers further. But I think you're not going to find.
I've seen your math that you've displayed. You really are good at showing the math. So that's one of the things that I think sets you apart from a lot of others who just are full of allegations. See the movie. Yeah. I'd recommend to everybody Vigilantes, Inc. And you'll see the process that Palast is talking about, and it's so offensive to you, probably as an American, that you'll want to do something. What could possibly be done, Greg? I mean, this is being asked over and over by people in our chat right now. What can we do about this? I mean, we have an energized public on some level now. What can be done?
Two things. Number one, for God's sake, protect your vote. Do like General Major. Check on your vote. Where's my ballot? Okay. So about 80 days before an election, about 2-3 months before an election, please check your registration. You could have been purged. You could have been canceled, challenged. Please do that. Second, when protect your vote. Second, don't go postal. Don't ever mail in your ballot if you can avoid it. Not that it's unlike what Trump said, that it's subject to fraud. It's subject to challenge. 1 in 7 ballots are thrown in the garbage. Don't let it be yours. So if you can, vote early. Don't wait for election day and find out you've been challenged, you can't vote. So start out by protecting your own vote and people you know, and get them to, every state has, you can check your registration online. If you mail in your ballot, by the way, you can check, almost every state allows you to check whether that ballot's been counted. You want to check that quickly, because if they don't count it, you got to go into your county office and what they call cure that ballot. Now that's the personal stuff to do. The second thing to do is join us. Join Reverend Jesse Jackson. Join the NAACP. Join Black Voters Matter Fund. Join these organizations which are fighting these tactics. And so we have to get active politically. I'm not saying don't count on any political party to save your vote. Because remember, the Democrats who are in office are elected by the current system. They're pretty happy with this in the end. You'd have a very different Democratic Party if everyone got to vote. So it wouldn't just be the Republicans who are scared of everyone voting. Democrats too. So you protect your own vote. Join the organizations. I want to take on this vigilante voter attack, which is brand new, and it's going to make the next election is going to be locked in unless we do something about it. And my concern is not which party you can vote for, Trump or Harris. That's not my business as a journalist. My business is to make sure that voters, not vigilantes, choose our president, choose our Senate. That's what we have to be concerned with. And again, we don't lose all the battles all the time. We've won some major court victories. We had a tremendous organizing effort in 2020, not to get Biden elected, but he would not have been elected if not for our actions in Wisconsin and Georgia, which carried those 2 states for Biden, because we ran a massive campaign to notify people who've been purged from the voter rolls to re-register. And we did that in both Wisconsin and Georgia. And if it not for that,
I didn't realize that's extraordinary. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's the groups. It's not Greg Palast. I just provide technical information.
CC says we need a Super Bowl ad promoting this movie, Greg Palast. Hello, Leo, Mark Cuban, etc. Yeah. I mean,
hello.
The word does have to get out there. Palast, mad respect for you. Thank you for coming through here, and keep us posted. You know, the door is always open here for you. So appreciate it.
We have
a link to your book, which I recommend to every American and to everyone watching. It's the best democracy money can buy, and there'll be a link to it under this video. Thanks, Greg Palast.
You're welcome.
All the best. Right on.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Vigilantes, Inc. is the movie. You should check it out. It's really an excellent film. There it is. America's new voter suppression hitmen. I did see in the chat, and I thought I handled it. I mean, I thought we took it on. Mudslinger says David Pakman broke down Palast's claims, and I agree he makes far too many extrapolations and assumptions to be credible. I mean, you can say that, Mudslinger. I asked him about that. It wasn't extrapolations that he was pointing to. So when you use the word extrapolations and you mention the Pakman thing, it actually doesn't track with what Palast actually was doing. He shows exactly how many people were disenfranchised from voter rolls. he didn't show a small sample size and then say, based on statistical modeling, so many people were thrown off. He showed you exactly how many people were thrown off. I mean, these are figures accessible. We had the conversation right here. So I think I think Pacman is your new shiny object based on what I'm reading from your comments, and you just don't want to get off of that. Maybe you have too much wrapped up in this conversation. As I've often said to you, I'll take a meeting on anything. I watched the Pacman thing, and I asked Palast about it. And Palast, I thought, answered it. So, Billy DeBono says, the when they go low, we go high days are over. Dems need to stop bringing politics and political policy to a gunfight. You need to get tougher. You need to get tougher, Dems. You do. You got to get on it.
Good day, sir.
Exactly. Thank you, Billy. Of course, you're right. I mean, you are right. And we saw the tepid response and the tepid handling of lawlessness on the part of Merrick Garland. I've gone off on him many times. You can put Joe Biden in that same category, I think, in many ways. But I agree. It's time to, you really, frankly, you had 4 years to really lean in, and you didn't. West Theory, thank you for the $5 super sticker. Appreciate that. You are an OG of this show. Thank you, Wes.
Big shout out.
Big shout out. Smash the like button if you would.
Smash
it helps us
with your iron
in
rod.
the YouTube world. The like button is king.
Smashed it with your iron rod.
Actually, subscriber button is king in the YouTube world. So thank you for subscribing to the show. Thank you for sharing the show across your social media or whatever. If you share a link, that helps build our footprint, just the way in which we slowly get the word out that we're here. Greg Palast is an absolute national treasure, says Underdog. I think he does good work. I really do. So Garland was taking a nap for 4 years. Exactly. Who said that? A hotspot. There it is. All right. I wanted first, before I get to maybe Kim's news, and I've got David Katz coming through, but I wanted to...
The Mark Thompson Show.
I got a cool text yesterday from the Roastmaster General.
Yeah.
Who is, who produces this incredible coffee. They are a sponsor on our show, but I'll tell you, I've been drinking their coffee before they were a sponsor. Coachella Valley Coffee. CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. You get 10% off because you're a Mark Thompson Show viewer or listener, and you just put in Mark T at checkout, and you'll get that discount. Now, they sent a text, and apparently, here's what happened. Those people that you see, the guy in the hat and the two women on either side of him, they are viewers and listeners of this show. And they were in the neighborhood of the Coachella Valley, and they actually went to visit Cliff, the Roastmaster General, and the people at Coachella Valley Coffee.
What?
Yeah, there it is. So there's Cliff holding up the cup, and I forget his name in the foreground, but he's he's like a big part of the operation too. And so those wonderful people stopped through, and Greg hooked them all up with a pound of coffee apiece. Yeah.
And I think he gave them a tour of the roasting facilities
as
well.
Yeah.
They got a special tour. They got the Mark Thompson Show VIP treatment.
They did. And they don't give tours. Like, it's not like open to the public. So he really extended a wonderful hand of hospitality to our crew that stopped through. So it's really great. So I love that you guys found your way to the Roastmaster General there at Coachella Valley Coffee. And again, if you haven't, grab yourself a pound or two of Coachella Valley Coffee. There's also the tea, and the website is filled with all kinds of tasting notes. It's really a wonderful thing. But do use the discount code 10% off if you use Mark T at checkout, and enjoy the coffee that we enjoy on the show. Yes. Nice perk, says Steve Becker. I know. We're very, very happy that those guys made it through there. So good stuff. Kim, let's do some news real quick, and then we'll get to some David Katz. Again, thanks for being here, everybody. Kim and I will wade through the day's events with some news, and then the great former federal prosecutor David Katz comes along on Thursdays, and we'll get to that after we do the news. Mark Thompson Show.
The Mark Thompson Show.
On the Mark Thompson Show, I'm Kim McAllister, and this report is sponsored by CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. A federal judge is delaying the deadline of the Trump administration's buyout offer to federal employees. The judge ordering the deadline for workers to make their decision until at least Monday. The original deadline was set for the end of today, the pause allowing for arguments over the offer at a hearing set for next week. The Department of Justice suing Illinois and Chicago for obstructing federal immigration enforcement efforts. The lawsuit also seeks to sweep away so-called sanctuary laws. The DOJ citing the national emergency declared by President Trump, and the department now looking to block the enforcement of state and local laws interfering with the government's enforcement of immigration law. President Trump says no American soldiers would be needed for the United States to take over the Gaza Strip. In a post on Truth Social, Trump said the takeover would see Palestinians resettle in far safer communities with new modern homes in the region. He added the United States is working with development teams from around the world to start the rebuilding process. Democrats are blocking a committee vote that would advance the nomination of President Trump's pick to lead the FBI. Democratic members of the Senate Judiciary Committee objected to the planned vote on Kash Patel's nomination. In a letter to the Republican committee chairman, the Democrats said they needed more information on Patel's invocation of the Fifth Amendment. The move means the committee will have to wait a week before voting on Patel's nomination.
It is wild that the guy has, he was invoking the fifth, left and right. And then when they ask him about it, we can talk to David Katz about this, but when they asked him questions, he was unable to answer them. He would sort of default. It was a weird kind of evasive move he made. So he was doubly evasive, first with the Fifth Amendment, and then with his, I don't want to talk about it, it's all there in my testimony, Yet, if but make my testimony public. But yeah, he was. I mean, Patel is a really dangerous dude, and it looks like like all the rest of these people, he'll likely get through. But we'll ask David about it.
So Democrats can delay it, but it's inevitably it'll be swiped through.
But as I've said to you before, just a last interruption, I've said to you, you Democrats should make everything they want to do as difficult as possible. That's what they did to you. That's what they did. I'll remind you about Tommy Tuberville. He made it impossible for basic promotions in the military to go through. One senator, they were in the minority at that time. You Democrats, if you're serious about this, you need to lean in to your ability to make life tough. So even if it's just to delay a confirmation, you need to do it.
Trump's tax cuts are stuck in Congress as Republicans remain split on the issue of government spending. A package of tax cuts, border security, energy policy, and health care funds tied up in the House as Republicans disagree over how much government spending to cut over the next decade. The disagreements have led Senate Republicans to propose their own legislation that would tackle these issues one by one, as opposed to a larger spending package that House Republicans prefer. Trump is establishing a task force, he says, will eradicate anti-Christian bias. What is this? The Holy Roller Task Force? Trump laid out his plan at the National Prayer Breakfast this morning. He said, and I quote,
"That's the right room for it." Yeah.
Know your audience. While I'm in the White House, he said, we will protect Christians in our schools, our military, our government, our workplaces, our hospitals, our public squares. And so now we have the Christian task force. Onward, Christian soldiers. President Trump is also calling at the same event this morning at the prayer breakfast for an overhaul of the country's air traffic control system. He says the air safety systems need to be dramatically improved after last weekend's air collision. He said he would speak to congressional leaders about drafting a bill aimed at creating a new computerized air traffic control system. The Palisades and Eaton fires together could end up being the second costliest natural disaster in U.S. history, behind Hurricane Katrina. A report released by UCLA researchers this week estimates the economic losses to be somewhere between $95 billion and $164 billion. The report estimates insured losses alone around $75 billion. The fires destroyed a combined 16,000 structures, and about 11,000 of those were single-family homes.
So that's an economically brutal, titanic number, and the event of immense proportion, as you've said. But I mean, just the idea somehow that you could go ahead in any way with business as usual. I mean, everything's going to change as a result of that. I'm talking about home ownership. I'm talking about insurance. I'm talking about land management, building, construction materials. Everything's going to change. This is an insanely big number, and it's a sign of the times, because all the numbers are going to grow. These natural disasters are going to be more common and, sadly, more expensive.
By the way, that report also says the disaster will reduce Los Angeles area's gross domestic product by about $4.6 billion, or that's a 0.5 percentage point this year, so affecting business as well. The East Bay, one East Bay city, is trying a new tactic when it comes to targeting the homeless crisis. In Fremont, leaders will soon vote on a new ordinance that would make it not only illegal to camp on any street or sidewalk in a public park or any other public property, but in what is believed to be a first in the state, the ordinance would target anyone who's aiding or abetting homeless camps. Those found guilty of such actions would be charged with a misdemeanor and face up to 6 months in jail and a $1,000 fine. Homeless activists are furious about the possibility, saying aid workers who provide services to people living in those encampments would be targeted. Supporters say such an ordinance is needed to improve safety in the city, and they've got a final vote on that set for next Tuesday. So it's illegal to be homeless, and it's illegal to help the homeless in those encampments as well. Yep. NVIDIA's AI framework is teaching humanoid robots how to move more like humans.
Albert, you're telling me that David Katz is here?
Yeah, he is.
He is here.
So
we'll
do this last story. Let Kim do this last story. Albert, how dare you interrupt Kim's report in any way?
Albert, thank you.
And I'm sorry, Kim. And Albert would like to apologize.
You're welcome,
I
David.
stand corrected.
Yeah, all right. Go ahead.
Well, then I'm going to skip the robot dancing, and I'm going to go.
Okay. Oh, you're okay. Well, I was really hooked on the robot dancing, but all right.
I'm going to pick Valentine's Day because I know it's your favorite holiday, Mark.
It is. It is. I'm full of romance.
You are like the boyfriend of the century.
Mm-hmm.
One estimate predicts people will spend a record $27.5 billion this Valentine's Day.
Wow.
I've never seen anything like it.
Yeah.
Front and center. It would beat out the $27.4 billion record set in 2020. According to a survey from the National Retail Federation, the people will spend their money online, followed by department stores and florists, and a little more than half of consumers say they'll be celebrating Valentine's Day this year. So,
wow.
February 6th.
Oh my God.
It doesn't leave you much time, Mark. You got to get on it.
I don't know, Kim. It's tough.
Put that coffee down.
Yeah, well, I have to put my coffee down and go get something done. All right.
I would rather receive a big order from Coachella Valley Coffee rather than roses.
And then maybe
I really would.
All right, we'll have to take
vanilla tea in the box, and I'm happy. This
All
report sponsored by CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. You can get the Mark Thompson Show discount. Just put in Mark T in the code box, and you get 10% off. CoachellaValleyCoffee.com.
Take that code box, put on Mark T, baby. That's what you got to do. Yeah.
And now we get to David Katz. I'm Kim McAllister. This is the Mark Thompson Show.
I got to get David Katz some of that coffee.
For Valentine's Day.
Well, I think that might be the plan. Yeah. All right. Stand by.
The Mark Thompson Show.
This is Mark Thompson.
Hey, Mark. It's George Santos here. A lot of people are telling me you're a liar.
That's pure speculation.
What's a little lie between friends?
morning.
We're in better shape, but I don't think we're in wildly better shape.
Your Honor, I'd like to ask for a recess.
This is a word from the Lord, and he's not happy.
Good day, sir.
Seriously, what the Why are you yelling?
I love Thursdays. I love Thursdays on this show. I look forward to it all week. In fact, this week of all others, I was thinking, wow, do we need a lawyer near us all the time? I mean, like every hour, I need a lawyer to go, is that legal? Can they do that? Can they just close down a government department like that? Can they just, anybody can get access to the Treasury Department? I need a lawyer. Well, now we all have a lawyer. The former federal prosecutor, one of the great legal analysts across the English-speaking world, now a defense attorney in Southern California. How about it for David Katz?
Great to be with you. Albert, thanks for speaking up for me. Thanks for having your San Francisco Giants hat on. If you look carefully, let me see if I can scooch. There's my Dodgers hat. So
Yeah.
Albert and I love each other. Those are the best games, better than the Red Sox, Yankees, right? Giants, Dodgers.
Yeah, it's true. That's a rival, one of the great rivalries in sports. Yeah.
I mean, we already lost the off season, so we'll see how the regular season.
All right. There it is.
All right, former federal prosecutor David Katz, now a defense attorney. Let's put your legal skills to work, because this is an administration that's come in hot, and already today, a judge has blocked an effort on the part of this administration to do a couple of things. So the courts are busy. The buyout offer is what a judge has paused. The big buyout offer that was extended across the U.S. government to essentially give people 8 months' pay, I believe it was, if they would resign from their positions. Again, it was across government. It was an extraordinary thing, given the fact that there was no money appropriated for this plan. They just came in and did it. Now a judge has paused this. Can you speak to its legality and what its future might be?
Well, Mark, that's a great point. It's a nationwide pause. I mean, as a practical matter, nothing can be done nationwide because this memo, Musk got a hold of the computer system. They'd been planning this for a while. It's not actually easy to send to all 2 million plus federal employees. They didn't send it to some national security federal government employees, but they hit almost every single one, over 2 million across the country, and then they sent it all at once. So there was this shock and awe element to it. And all you had to do was push the button that said resign. I mean, more than half the people thought it was a joke. But all you had to do was push the button resign and then push send, reply. And basically you had resigned. And supposedly thousands of people resigned. I think some in error, but I think some thinking, wow, I'm going to get 8 months pay. I'm not going to have to go into work because they were working from home. So 8 months I'll get pay. I don't have to basically do any work. I certainly don't have to abide by the go into the office, don't work remotely requirement. And so it seemed very tempting, especially to people who maybe were planning to retire soon or who were planning to leave the government for other reasons. Anyway, a memo had to be sent out to the same 2 million people today by the judge's order, telling them that they didn't have to do anything by Thursday, that had been basically taken off the table by the court. But it's not taken off the table permanently. The union representing the federal workers has to reply by tomorrow to the federal judge. And then by Monday, there's going to be a hearing. So definitely stay tuned to this one. I think that they tried to do it so fast in this shock and awe way that I think it will get extended. If there's some underlying ability to do this, Mark, it's certainly not to do it on a week's notice. So there'll be some time to think about it. I think anyone who did it in haste will be allowed to rescind. But if they can get the money for it, you see, that's one of the problems. It's not funded at all. And, we had all the Chevron deference thing. And of course, the Republicans love Chevron deference cases when it was their way. When there was something that an agency was doing that they didn't like, all of a sudden, Congress hadn't really bought in. They hadn't made it clear enough in the statute that this was something that could be done, in the trenches. Well, can this really be done in the trenches for over 2 million employees? Did Congress have in mind when they passed any of these statutes, did they make it clear that a new administration could give people 7 or 8 months pay for no work, and that was all funded? That was something Congress wanted to pay for. And also, are they following the rules in the Administrative Procedures Act, which makes it very clear, hey, you have to give notice, you have to put it in the Federal Register, you have to have a comment period. So it may be that they have to go through all of that. But at the end of the day, I believe, yes, they can offer some kind of inducement if they do it properly for people to leave now. They can give them more money. And if I can just mention one thing, on my mother's side, my grandmother was a lifetime federal employee in Washington, D.C. And when Nixon came in after LBJ, Nixon had a program kind of like this, that you would get more pay for a period of time that you weren't actually working. My grandmother took it, or she said, Nixon forced me out of the government. After all these years, a Republican forced me out of the government. And she really regretted retiring. She was one of those people who said, you know what, taking the bus down Connecticut Avenue and going into the Export-Import Bank, that was something I really liked. And I really shouldn't have retired. So all the people out there who are thinking of retiring or leaving the government, you know, generally speaking, they do really noble, public-spirited work. Hang in there. Hang in there. I know it's a drag to commute after you've gotten used to staying home. It's tough if you're raising kids, especially. Much easier to do at home than if you have to schlep into the office every day. But federal government employees, hang in there.
I'm glad you mentioned your mom. I'm glad you mentioned grandmother. Excuse me. I'm glad you mentioned your grandmother and the idea of going into the federal government through different administrations. My dad worked for the government for a long time, and you know, he was really a nonpartisan in a big way. Like sometimes he'd vote Democrat, sometimes he'd vote Republican. He was a very considered, brilliant man. You know, my dad was a brilliant guy. So, but more to the point, I remember when he was Nixon also asked for his resignation because he was high enough that at a certain level you ask for resignations from everyone. It's kind of a pro forma thing. And then he rejected it, and then my dad continued to work. But more to the point, your grandmother, my father, many people work in government and do diligent work and attend to the tasks in front of them and to the mission statement in front of them. And sometimes the government leans left when Democrats win. Sometimes the government leans right when Republicans win. But to the point, and this brings me to the next issue that I wanted to ask you about, the idea that you could go after federal prosecutors and lawyers who are working for the government at the FBI and beyond in any kind of capacity, as Pam Bondi is now doing. She's asking to see everybody who worked in any way on these cases against J6ers, Donald Trump, and the prosecutions that followed involving J6 and beyond. These are, in the main, aren't they, David Katz? Federal employees that are kind of doing what your grandmother was doing. They're attending to the task in front of them, and the task that was assigned was to help with the prosecution or investigations associated with those cases.
This was the largest prosecution in the history of the Department of Justice, including the largest prosecution ever conducted by the FBI. It would have been anomalous if you hadn't worked on it, because they suddenly needed to prosecute a lot of people. Some of them were detained, and it kind of made sense. They brought it at the Capitol. 5 people were killed. Let's never minimize it. Let's never get gaslighted by these people. We all saw it on TV. It was awful. It was hundreds and hundreds of people going in there trying to gouge out the eyes of the guards who worked there, who, of course, totally nonpartisan. They're protecting everybody there, Democrat and Republican. So they need a lot of people, especially if someone was detained. They were especially going to need a speedy trial. And so there were a lot of assistant U.S. attorneys out here in Los Angeles and everywhere else who had to put their all of their devices on D.C. time, on East Coast time, because they had to always remember to work on that schedule, that they had to file something, you know, not by midnight here, but by 9 o'clock here. And so they turned a lot of their clocks back because they had to work on those cases. And likewise with the FBI, there was no partisan aspect to it at all. They needed a lot of bodies on deck because it was an enormous ship of prosecutions that they were having to steer through the federal court systems with the Speedy Trial Act. So this is all, and I would say this, regardless of politics, I don't think there is one FBI agent or special agent or one assistant U.S. attorney who didn't think this was a righteous case. You had a videotape of somebody hammering on the head of some poor guy saying, I've got kids at home. Please stop beating me. The police officer at the Capitol would say, I've got kids at home. I've got a family that needs me. Who on earth didn't think that was a righteous case? Who in their right mind? And so it's all this politicization of the Department of Justice by Trump. You know, he's always into projection. So, of course, he says that the Department of Justice has been weaponized against him. No, it wasn't. And in fact, he is weaponizing it. And Kash Patel and some of his other picks are trying to weaponize it. And it's just awful. The good news today is that there's at least been a week-long delay on Kash Patel. So the people who think that he's inevitably going to get in, I'm not so sure about that. We could talk about it if you'd like to. And his taking the fifth. I will say this. When Trump says you've never seen anything like it, no, you've never seen anything like someone nominated to be the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation who himself invoked his rights under the Fifth Amendment. You have a right to invoke your right under the Fifth Amendment, and the people of this country, through their elected representatives and senators, have a right to say, no, you should not be the director of the FBI for that reason and so many others, Kash Patel.
Speak to that then. Now, but before I get to that, I want to get to the Kash Patel thing and the Fifth Amendment invocation. But I want to ask you, just to button this out, she is within her right, Pam Bondi, the new Attorney General, to get those names. As you say, there'll be just leagues and leagues of names, right? Because, as you say, it was such a huge case. She's within her right to get rid of all those people?
No, I don't think she's within her right to get rid of those people. There are civil service protections. And you can only be removed as an assistant U.S. attorney or an FBI agent for cause. And there's no cause, and there's a civil service panel, and you're entitled to all kinds of due process. So no, the famous one was J. Edgar Hoover. J. Edgar Hoover didn't want to go through those civil rights protections. So if you didn't have your shoes shined or something like that, he would send you to Alaska. But
they
he wouldn't
they can make your life difficult, for sure.
They could probably make your life difficult. You can complain to the Civil Service Commission. You can maybe even file a lawsuit and maybe even win it. There's a lot of them that are being brought right now by the FBI agents. I think there's 2 different lawsuits that are brought by the FBI agents. I think these are higher up ones. And this new acting attorney general, who's Trump's old lawyer, right? Oh, this is every criminal defendant's fantasy, to not only try to get retribution and vengeance against the people who prosecuted you, right? But to try to go after the FBI agents, make their life miserable and stuff like that. It's every criminal defendant's darkest fantasy. And we have it in the White House right now. And we seem to have it with this acting attorney general. I guess he's not acting. I guess he's number 2. He's the deputy attorney general now that Bondi has been approved. And yes, he's said that they were insubordinate because they didn't immediately turn over the names of these FBI agents and the fact that they worked on some of the January 6 cases. Now, when you get discovery, it often says, like an FBI interview, it'll show who the FBI special agent is who interviewed. They were interviewed by Special Agent Jones and Smith. And you see that right in the report. Normally, a protective order, Mark, would not cover that. So it's even in public records in some of the discovery, if it ever got filed in open court. So yes, if you had a diligent private person going through publicly available sources, you could figure out who a lot of those FBI agents were, and they could certainly laboriously do that. But that's not what they have in mind. They want the FBI itself, the top people at the FBI now, to prepare a list and say, here are the dirty 600. Here are the 600 who worked on the Trump case. Put it all in one neat little package. The 2 heads of the FBI didn't do that fast enough now for this deputy attorney general, and he's now saying that they were insubordinate. He's obviously getting ready to try to take them before some civil service panel, and if they resist, his cause is that they were going to be insubordinate for not immediately snapping to and going, yes, here's the dirty 600, and I gave it to you within the 2 days that you demanded it.
It may be a multi-step process, but it feels to me like a purge. I mean, they're trying to purge that agency one way or the other so that they can put in loyalists, and that is their plan. That's Project 2025's plan. I wanted to ask you now to move to Patel. You had mentioned him before. The invocation of the Fifth Amendment, can you put it in some context for us and then tell us why senators did follow up and ask him to provide testimony, and he didn't provide it? He was wildly combative and evasive during his confirmation hearing.
Mark, he's an extraordinarily poor choice for the FBI. Sometimes you can imply that someone may be biased. You can try and take from things that they've written. Whenever they don't like one of these federal judges, that the Republicans don't like and that they don't want to approve. They go back and find some writing, and because they always seem to be conservative Southern Republicans. I almost want to say this in a Southern accent, but I won't. But they start asking about your writings. And in your writings, they find some writing from 15 years ago where they say somebody suggested that they were a feminist, or somebody suggested they were in favor of affirmative action. And that one article, they try to beat them with, the Judiciary Committee. Here is a man who published a book with an enemies list as its appendix. It had as its addendum an enemies list. It named people like sitting senators, sitting Congress members, the people who prosecuted Trump after they got grand jury indictments against him. He had an express enemies list, recent vintage. He's written books where Trump is the king, and when the people are attacking the king, traitorously, are actual people that he can go after right now. On top of that, he apparently knew something about Mar-a-Lago. He'd either seen or heard something at this Mar-a-Lago situation where Trump was keeping these documents after he purloined them from the White House in Washington, after he kept them, after he obstructed justice allegedly in not returning them, after allegedly he put up lawyers to lie and misrepresent the situation. Kash Patel knew something about that. That was of interest to the grand jury. When he was called in front of the grand jury, instead of saying, no, that didn't happen, he said, I am the right under the Fifth Amendment against self-incrimination not to answer your question because it would be self-incriminating. Since he had a right to say that, it wasn't frivolous, that it would have been self-incriminating, that it would have put himself, Kash Patel, in criminal peril had he answered the question. He was then given immunity. So with immunity, he couldn't be put in criminal peril because he would have immunity for what he answered. He then answered those questions, Mark. It's in a grand jury transcript. Congress is having trouble because the Republicans are in charge of the Judiciary Committee and in charge of the Senate. They can't get that grand jury record. If they made a joint request, the judge would order it turned over and they'd have it the next day. But the head of the Senate Judiciary Committee, this old Republican guy, he won't approve it. Suddenly he doesn't want it. So they say to Kash Patel, you have a right under the First Amendment to tell the world what you said in front of the grand jury. So since you have the right to tell us, you have no protection against telling us, what'd you say in front of the grand jury some months ago? And this man who wants to be the director of the FBI, suddenly it's like every quote, I don't remember, Your Honor. Well, it was just 2 months ago. Oh, busy life. I don't really remember. This is the guy who's going to be director of the FBI. This was his answer. He doesn't remember. He doesn't recall. Why don't you get it from the, then they play that circular game, right? Where Kash Patel says, why don't you just get it from the grand jury? Well, they can't get it from the grand jury because the Republican head of the Judiciary Committee is not letting them get it from the grand jury. And then they put that on Fox that, it's another big witch hunt of Kash Patel. It's absolutely righteous, Mark. And at least they put it over for a week. And, different things happen. Remember Kavanaugh? Kavanaugh came so close to not making it because it got put over. And then they went totally to bat for him because he was going to be a U.S. Supreme Court justice. Will they really go to bat all the way for Kash Patel? He's going to embarrass the Republican senators who voted for him. To me, it's already clear that there's no way the Republicans hold the Senate in 2 years. Trump has acted in such a way that he's dragged down the Republican senators with him. So it's just a matter of holding on. That's why I'm optimistic. Every week that goes by, Mark, there's 100 weeks until the Senate is no longer Republican. And so you get through one of the 100 weeks, you get through 2 of the 100 weeks. By the time you get through 3 of the weeks, you're 3% of the way through.
You're always
Republican control.
You always turn my frown upside down, David Katz. I wonder what the government will look like at that time when those midterms show up.
There'll be elections. The people who say there won't be elections, Mark, there'll be elections. Yes, the Republicans will try to put their finger on the scale of the election like they always do. But with enough, Trump will be so unpopular. By the way, the 51st state, Gaza, will they vote Democratic? Maybe we'll get 2 Democratic senators out of Gaza finally. 2 more Democratic senators. I mean, It's so insane, Mark. It's so insane. I know people say it's distraction, so look over here. Don't look over the terrible things that he's doing with Kash Patel and the civil service. I know part of it is distraction, but he looks so bad. He looks so stupid, okay? When you go to the Thanksgiving party with your Republicans, if you talk about politics at all, Ask him, what'd you think about that? We're going to send American troops to hold Gaza. This is a disaster for Israel, trying to have them right next door. And we're going to go jump in the middle of the most fraught war in the world, this unsolvable war.
Well, I mean, we need...
So we can have a Riviera, Mark, so we can have if they want to have a Riviera right now. By the way, the country belongs to the Palestinians. They left, in the late 40s. It's incredibly controversial, in the Palestinian lore, about how they left, and they shouldn't have left. They should have stayed there. They should have, lived with the Jews, and not left. Since they left, they've never been able to return. That's the problem. There's no right of return. They're in these squalid, awful refugee camps, generation after generation. The idea that we're going to build beautiful homes for the people in Gaza, why haven't we built them for the last many decades?
Well, I mean,
for refugees.
Look, Gaza was also, there were Israelis in Gaza, and they withdrew from Gaza. It was quite controversial. There were avocado groves, there were pharmacies, there were factories. It was really a wonderful place, apparently, and they literally had to drag people out. I mean, it was not easy. The residents of Gaza, I'm talking about the Israeli residents of Gaza, didn't want to leave, but they wanted no Jews there in Gaza, and they got them all out, and they set fire to a lot of this stuff, and Gaza really began, as you suggested, this kind of awful plundering that went on with Hamas, etc. That's a real shorthand on what's going on, but that's the back and forth. On the one hand, you have so many Palestinians who really do have a right to live there in their homeland, and you have Israelis who feel also they've contributed so much to that land, and they also have a biblical right to be there. So I feel in the Middle East, it's all when you walked into the movie. You know what I mean? It's a really, really tough one to both understand and really be fair about. And as you say, I mean, taking a wrecking ball to the whole thing the way Trump has is just crazy. Hey, look, if you want the Riviera and you seem to be so horny to send troops everywhere, go to the actual Riviera. Let's just take that. I mean, it's already built up, and apparently, it's pretty popular. I want to ask you about...
I'm just saying, Mark, yeah. Trump took a big step backwards. The idea that this was somehow clever, this was being so outrageous that it made the Israelis' outrageous positions seem even less outrageous. That's not true. He really hurt us in the world, as he has with so many of these things. What he said about the Panama Canal, what he just said about Gaza, it really hurts us in the world. America, to the extent that we're extraordinary, to the extent that people hold us in great esteem around the world, boy, you blow that capital. You blow that capital where people don't want to do what America would like them to do. And so we have to send troops. We have to spend more money on the military, or we decide that that's what we want to do. He really hurts us. And if they ever go off the dollar, there's no imposing sanctions if these BRIC countries go off the dollar.
This is a great point that David Katz is making right now. What I've talked about on this show is the fact that already, because of so many of these edicts that Trump has issued, already these nations that were formerly our allies are beginning to ally with each other, and they're doing it independent of the U.S. They now realize they can't count on the U.S. anymore. And that understanding that the U.S. dollar is this stable currency, and that becomes the currency, the petrodollar, et cetera, if that goes away, we are in huge, huge trouble. I mean, this nation, I don't want to say third world, but we will have the debt of a third world nation and nowhere to dump it. I think you make a great point about that.
I don't think the Chinese Communist government will have the ingenuity and the humanity to do it. But you take something like USAID. If the Chinese did have the ingenuity and the humanity to do it, they would take over every single one of our USAID programs. They would be the great benefactor to Africa and the other third world countries. And they would sock us right in the jaw in a way that's very hard to recover from. Who did this? Who just did this to America? Trump and Musk.
Sure. That's so true. I think also, honestly, China already is. They're not doing the humanitarian stuff as much as you suggested, but their Belt and Roads Initiative is already well launched in the continent of Africa, Latin America, et cetera. I want to get back to a legal question for you. This is a kind of a layup. We sort of knew it would be a legal layup, and that's the 2 federal judges now in as many days blocking the birthright citizenship order. I mean, that's a constitutional provision. You knew that was going to be blocked. That's why I say it was a layup.
Well, it was a layup. I predicted it. I don't get a Katz-Adamus point for that one. That one was too easy. But when it was a bumper sticker. It was a sop to his most MAGA followers. And again, if he wanted to do something rational about it, they could try to figure out a way to figure who's coming here basically for birth tourism. And they could, in a humanitarian, intelligent way, they could see that someone who's coming here for they're 7.5 months pregnant, why are they coming here? You know, intelligently not issue a visa to that person if you think that's what they're doing. Go aggressively after what they call birth mills. There are allegedly people who come from China en masse, pay a lot of money to smugglers or just to travel agents to get them over here just to have a baby so the baby will be a U.S. citizen and then they go on with their life. If that's really what's going on, fine. Go after it aggressively. And I want to say something else, Mark, because I said this last week, and a lot of people gave me really favorable comments. I appreciated it. And I had what was a fairly original idea. I haven't heard it other places, which was that if the states should really take over the protection of people like Milley, like Fauci. If they can't litigate in court and get entitlement that the federal government has to give them that protection. These former, Pompeo, the Iranians supposedly have a hit on former Secretary of State Pompeo for an action he took with Trump, whether you agree with it or not. It was his official duty. It was something that he and Trump decided.
This is for the assassination of Soleimani. Yeah, exactly.
Right. And now the Iranians want personal retribution against him. They want to kill him. And he's got a protective detail, which Trump canceled. And he's canceled Fauci's protective details and other ones. If they can't litigate and get their protective detail back at federal government expense, we rich blue states should protect them. And I have the same thought, Mark, about that's something we can afford. You know, we're the 5th largest economy in the world, California. We can afford to protect 5 or 6 people. And show
well, you
Trump.
keep saying that, David Katz, but I mean, the roads in Los Angeles and San Francisco would tell you a different story. I'm just saying there doesn't look like a lot of money floating around.
But Mark, you know how much money we spend in California when we care about a principle, and that's a principle to protect 6 people. I say the same about these FBI agents. If any FBI agent, after actually litigating their case, is fired or terminated, we should hire them in California. There is no reason why California can't have a California Bureau of Investigation, which is better than the FBI. Why shouldn't we? Why shouldn't New York? Why do they just assume, well, this is left up to the feds, the FBI will do such great work? Let's hire those FBI agents in these states. You know, a lot of these crimes that people prosecute in federal court, they can be prosecuted in state court. These people who commit fraud is a state offense, and there's some connection with California. So I think it would be great if we would tell those people, look, litigate your cases, try to stay in the federal government. But if you don't, you're not going to be fired. If you don't want to be fired, you're not going to be fired. You're going to be hired by California, New York, Maryland, one of the rich blue states.
I love that kind of breakthrough concept. I really do. It's super innovative. I want to ask you about Elon Musk, finally, David, in our conversation about the legality of what he's doing. I understand that he's gone in there just like a SWAT team with his 19 to 25-year-old dudes who, he plays Fortnite with, and he goes in and hacks essentially the U.S. Treasury. Now, when I say hacks, to be fair, he was given the green light to do it by what's his name? Barrett, I think his name is, the new Secretary of the Treasury. But what I want to ask you about is the legality. Okay, so these Musk allies, they go in there. They have access to these highly sensitive materials that speak to privacy issues with all Americans and American businesses and even foreign businesses. And I'm wondering, even given that green light, isn't there there must be some legal stickiness to this, I guess is what I'm getting at. And I wondered from you if there was any.
Well, Mark, you're so wise to focus on the fact that there is authorization, and there are some employees who are part of the administration now who are doing this. So while I think it's outrageous, and I strongly suspect, I'm very, very worried that Musk is doing it for his own personal aggrandizement, either to find out stuff about his competitors and screw his competitors some way. Now, of course, when and if they unleash this against a competitor, the competitors are pretty smart too. If it's the competing company, because no one's buying Teslas anymore, they're buying the competing electric car in California and all these other states, and Musk wants to try to screw that competitor. That competitor has some money to avoid being screwed. And the first time something comes out that's a violation of the Privacy Act, the first time you see something that their lawyers and investigators at the rival firm says, how did Musk know that? They'll bring a huge lawsuit and they'll sue Musk, who can afford to pay. So can SpaceX, so can Tesla. They can afford to pay an enormous judgment. They'll try to obtain an enormous judgment for violating the Privacy Act and other federal laws like that. So there are ways that Musk can get caught. Also, there's supposed to be ways to track who goes into these computer systems. And so hopefully you can get the footprint. People are worried that they're not just read only, but they're also writing. That these 17-year-olds are also writing in there. You know, they couldn't publish the name of one of them because he's a minor. Think about that.
It's crazy. And to your point on what I was reading early on, and I think it was in a Wired magazine piece, is that they actually did build in backdoor entry for so many of these tech bros to follow up and continue to have access to this system that I'm sure they feel is somewhat antiquated. I mean, the federal computer systems do need to be upgraded in large measure, and I'm sure even the upgraded version that might exist at Treasury probably isn't as current as the ones that these guys are used to working on because they're tech ninjas. But they have built in these sort of a backdoor way to get into these systems on an ongoing basis. And were we able to document that, I'm sure that's a legally actionable case.
Well, some of this may be, legitimate efforts that need to be done. I mean, everyone's talked about the fact that, when you communicate with the IRS on some matters, you have to send them a fax. We had to go run around and find someone who still had a fax or had a machine that was, that was usable as a fax. So we know that they have very antiquated systems, but you know what? They kind of work. Let's keep that in mind too. They kind of work. People do get their Social Security check. And so the idea of going in there and tinkering with any of this stuff, even if he doesn't use it, Musk and his minions don't use it to hurt competitors or exploit it. The nightmare is that they compare who voted Democratic and who's getting a Social Security check. And you have a huge snafu with your federal government checks if you voted Democratic. There's no proof that they've done exactly that yet, but that's the sort of thing that people worry about. But the reason that I think that they'll probably get away with most of this is that, again, the Republicans in the Senate have approved people for these jobs. It looks like they're going to approve this guy a vote. And so hopefully they won't. But, they'll have their people there. The president and his cabinet are supposed to execute the laws. They're executing the law. They're updating the systems. They need to look in there and see what's going on. Now, Musk has already sent out a tweet, an X, whatever they call it now, that, by the way, congratulations to you going to Blue Sky. I'm going to do that too, Mark. But he sent out some kind of thing. He sent out something on X that said that they're looking at Medicare and Medi-Cal because that's where the big fraud takes place. I'm sure there's big fraud that takes place. It's astonishing. They might want to start with the Republican Senator Scott, who has been accused, I think credibly, of running one of the biggest Medicare, Medi-Cal scams in the history of the United States.
I thought it's more than accused.
Extremely rich. He became extremely rich, and now he's a huge Trumpster from Florida.
It's more than accused, David. His company that he was running, I believe they were guilty of the biggest Medicare fraud in history. I mean, look it up. I'm fairly certain that
Google it.
I don't. But again, because of the way we do things here, he wasn't personally having to pay any kind of price. He didn't personally go to prison.
My company did it. I got rich, but my company did it.
But again, Musk's group has, and this is from the Washington Post, officially taken over the White House, formerly known as the U.S. Digital Service, which was renamed on Trump's first day in office as the U.S. Doge Service. His allies are running the GSA, which manages real estate, procurement, and IT, and the Office of Personnel Management, which handles HR. With control of logistics, they're taking extraordinary measures to slash all parts of the government, pushing mass resignations, accessing a Treasury Department payment system, obtaining federal student loan data, and challenging the very existence of the U.S. Agency for International Development. And that's just one prong of this strategy to command the technical guts of the federal government, which undergird everything from login pages for government applications to Social Security to everything else that is now moving to put loyalists in charge of this tech world government-wide. This is an extraordinary thing that's happening, and it's being done by a guy who certainly has the means to bring in technical expertise to take over government.
Well, this is a huge problem, a huge concern. I heard some Democratic senators saying this is a hair on fire moment, that this is one that has to be pushed back within days, because if it's as nefarious as some people fear, they will get information that they can really exploit. And maybe the people who are worried that there won't be any kind of fair vote in 2 years are worried about how this data might be used for those purposes. And of course, there's people who are just scared how they steal from the government. If you could somehow, you read about some fraud and you think, how did somebody steal $200 million? Well, they fooled around with some bank thing. They fooled around with some control at some bank thing. And it's very scary. If they're writing any code, they claim it's read only. But, this guy at the Treasury Department, this is what I don't understand about people like him. He's already a billionaire. What does he need this for? What's his name? Bessender or something
Barrett,
like that?
I think, yeah.
Yeah. Why would he want to be so tarnished by this? You look at who the Treasury secretaries have been. I don't think one, they said a few things about Mnuchin and stuff like that. But as I think back on Treasury secretaries, they're esteemed. They were esteemed when they went in, they were esteemed for their performance, and they were esteemed when they came out. Why does this Treasury secretary want to do this? He wanted that job so bad, he's going to turn that over to Musk. He's so scared he's going to say no. What, I guess he get fired? He thinks, okay, I'll be fired. He doesn't care that I'm this famous billionaire Wall Street guy. Trump will fire me the next week if I say no to Musk. Is that really what he thinks? Won't any of them say no? Because he gave permission. He's the confirmed Treasury Secretary. He gave permission to these people to go into these computer systems. And that's why at the end of the day, I think legally it's going to be a nothing burger. Unfortunately, it's scary as hell. But I think it may be a nothing burger
because of the authorization.
If they're writing code and they're not allowed to write code in there, and if people don't get their Social Security checks, of course, then there'll be a huge outcry.
Yeah, there'll be a controversy, but the legality of it is going to be covered up technically. They can write code. They can cover the fact that they wrote code. I mean, they really. Let me just speak to the Treasury Secretary thing, because you're sending this guy up, and I think you're right about everything you say. But you also know, having worked in Washington, I grew up in D.C. around all these people as well. There's a prestige associated with many of these appointments, and so when you say, why would this billionaire want to be Secretary of the Treasury? I know you're just asking the question rhetorically, but I think the reality is that these guys want that shimmer. They want that profile of having been Secretary of the Treasury. His autograph will be on all the currency. I mean, it's a little crap like that, David Katz, but they want to be in the parade. And the way to be in the parade is to shut your mouth and do what the king wants. And that's kind of what Washington has become.
But he's already in the parade, is my point. It seems to me this is one that he could have stood up to. So,
I see.
The fact that I think one of the reasons Musk wanted it so bad, there's two different aspects to it. I think one is what use he could really make of it. And I think he's fascinated to figure out what use he can make to, for self-aggrandizement and for punishing his economic and political enemies, perceived enemies by Musk. But I think the second thing is just the look of it is great. Just the idea that maybe he knows your health history. You're his rival. Maybe he's got his health history. Maybe he's got the disciplinary record of some government investigator who's after him. Because, it's terrible. People voted for Trump, so that prices would come down, Mark, not so that planes would come down, not so that planes would come down. They fired the FAA. I mean, that this was so poorly reported by the legacy media, okay? They come in, they fire the head of the FAA. Why do they fire the head of the FAA? Because the FAA was investigating Musk for something, or one of Musk's
right.
companies.
No, that's exactly
right. Why did
right.
they get rid of USAID? Because USAID's inspector general was investigating Musk or one of his companies for. He's gotten rid of 2 or 3 other people. So, like I said, it's a criminal defendant's fantasy, isn't it, to be able to go through and not have them hold you to account, but hold to account your accusers. Wow. What a fantasy for him and Trump.
These guys are playing out their fantasies, and we're way over time. But Dave asks, Mark, if there's time, can you ask Katz about the legalities of sending U.S. citizen prisoners to Salvadoran prisons? I think
that totally that's beyond the pale. We can't. It's like sending an American to Guantanamo. And as to sending the worst of the worst, the 30,000 worst of the worst to Guantanamo, Trump loves to spend money. If the Democrats ever spent money like Trump spends money, the Republicans would be screaming. But if it's Trump spending the money, can you imagine how much more expensive it is to house a prisoner in Guantanamo, an island that we have to bring all the food and supplies into, rather than somewhere in Texas or Idaho or wherever the prisoner would otherwise be? It's so fun. And Trump liked only one thing about it, because it made no sense, like the Gaza thing. The only thing he liked was sending illegal immigrants Guantanamo, right? That. And that's what that was another bumper sticker, right? Another bumper sticker. Send the bad guys. And, I understand why some of the Democrats voted for it, Mark. But, the Democrats voted for this bill about this, with name for this poor woman who got killed.
Yeah.
And she got killed by someone who was illegally in the country, and he'd been released. But you know what he'd been released for, Mark? Shoplifting. So now this bill says that, everybody should be deported, right down to shoplifting, because if they think if this guy had been denied bail or been deported for shoplifting, Mark, he wouldn't have been denied bail for shoplifting. He wouldn't have been, it just, none of this would have happened. But now, and I understand why they're worried for their seats, the Democrats voted for it, but that is going to increase their ability to arrest people. And the last thing, Mark, is that of that flight that cost $800,000 that should have cost $200,000, but Trump spent the money on that flight, that military flight. Half the people on the flight had not committed any crime. They'd been arrested for no crime. They were just people who'd crossed the border. Yes, they were not entitled to cross the border. That's a civil offense, Mark, civil. But half the people that were getting deported, that was just a show deportation. So, Mark, we're fighting back. I tell you this, there's 2 banana peels there, and Trump wants to stand on both banana peels. Tomorrow he'll stand on a 3rd banana peel. His popularity is plummeting, Mark, and prices are not coming down. Eggs and milk are going up in price.
Sure. I mean, but again, they'll spin everything and they'll make it federal law that we all have to stand on banana peels. I mean, this is crazy. It's a crazy Habsburgian king who's taken over and has the support of a party completely in his thrall. It'll be interesting the moment that it all breaks. There'll be a watershed moment where people go, we can't do this anymore, but it's extraordinary.
Obama had 60 senators. He had a filibuster-proof Senate. He had the House, okay? And the Democrats fought like hell. They fought like hell. Can't Democrats fight like hell? Come on, learn a few things from them, like this Tuberville guy. He slowed every single appointment down. The Democrats aren't as smart as the coach of the Alabama football team.
That's what I've been saying. I've been saying make life tough. You have the ability to do it, even in the minority. David Katz, we will continue this. There's a couple of questions I want to put to the side until next time, but we have to recess for now.
Okay, Mark, you can't have me every hour you need me, but you can have me next Thursday.
I'm looking forward to it already. Thank you, David Katz. David Katz, everybody.
Great to be with you. Albert Kim, great to be with you.
Yes, indeed.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Oh, my God. I didn't even get a chance to tell you about my newest sponsor. We fell in love with a plumber, honest to God, so much in love that we wanted to share the word for real. Like I just said, hey, I'll get it. This is for those in Los Angeles and Orange County, one-day plumber and rooter. We paid for this whole, I don't want you to think I got a discount at all. We paid full price for the work we had done, but you can get a discount from one-day rooter and plumber. Again, if you're just listening, it's the number 1 and the word day, rooter and plumbing.com. So one day rooter and plumbing.com does all sorts of things. And if they don't fix your problem, they won't charge you. Sewer and drain experts. You have water leaks, drain leaks, gas leaks. They do it all. They did a huge job for us, and they did it. And we got estimates from a lot of different plumbing orders. They did it for less money, more efficiently, without disrupting us in the house. It was extraordinary. And we really did want to share the word with you. So they said, can we maybe come on your show or something? And I said, well, let's do this little sponsorship and see if this works. It's just the chance to get the word out. So you can see all the different stuff they do if you're watching on YouTube now. One Day Rooter and Plumbing. Bob and Josh over there are just the best. So you can reach them by email. And this is the best part. If you're a viewer or listener to this show, you get 10% off. Just mention our show, The Mark Thompson Show. And if you're a senior or a military member or a veteran or a first responder, you get 5% discount additionally. So if you're a senior and you're a military person, 15% off. Just saying. Not bad. Again, check them out at onedayrouterandplumbing.com. What's that, Kim?
Is it Orange County or where is it?
It's Orange County and Los Angeles. So LA County and Orange County. They're licensed, insured, they're bonded. And again, 10% plus 5%, a lot of discount. Again, their service area is Los Angeles County and Orange County. One day, routerandplumbing.com. Reach them, go to their website, mention us, and live in peace. There is nothing better than finding a great plumber. And we've found them, and now I'm telling you about them. I wish they worked all over the country. They don't. Just in Los Angeles and Orange County. So, rock on. One day, Rooter and Plumbing. Right on.
Hey, which one do you use, Mark Thompson?
Who's Mark Thompson?
The Mark Thompson Show.
Kim, I can't believe it. I just can't. I can't believe it's time. Feel like I'm just catching a second wind.
I know.
I can keep going.
There's so much.
Keep going.
Maybe
we need a third hour.
I do need a third hour.
Why are you yelling?
All right, now, quickly, do we have to clean up anything around here, Albert? What do I have? Scott Healy says cost control requires a surgeon, not a butcher. You do it poorly and it costs you double in the end. That's about the Trump approach to and Musk approach to controlling government costs. They don't have, they only have a huge meat cleaver, okay? They don't have a surgeon on hand. They really don't. Cousin Erie, many are in favor of the dismantling because of that which is not of God is of Satan. Yeah, I think there is an extreme philosophy that is being employed. Is this the Kraken that Powell promised? Asks Edward Campbell. Thanks for doing this show, says Deborah B. Well, thank you for watching and supporting the show. Yeah, it really means a lot. And Lori Dolly with a $20 super chat saying, thanks for another great Thursday show. Greg P., David K., Mark T., Kim McC., Tony, and Albert bringing it every day.
Oh,
it is true.
Yeah.
We really do appreciate the support, and thank you for recognizing that some work goes into bringing it to you. Billy DeBono says, David, the reason that you went from prosecutor to defense attorney, I was going to put that to the side because obviously David's not with us right now. So we were just running so late, I couldn't get that in. And Shot of Welch, Hug a Flower, with a super sticker for $2. Thank you, guys. We're crowdfunded, so I appreciate everybody throwing in on the show today. It does make a difference. Albert will curate a Florida segment for you tomorrow. How long has the Trump administration been in power? Feels like about 2.5 years, but it's only been a couple of weeks. We will review the last couple of weeks and everything going down with political analyst Michael Schur tomorrow. And we'll update everything going on both today and overnight, not the least of which involve this, last-minute injunctions on the part of judges to some of these executive orders, the birthright citizenship, the buyout of federal employees, and more. Luann Caskey, every day I listen. Thank you, Mark. Love it. Kim's got the after party live next. Maybe you want to give that a ride. And
I'm Shadow Stevens for the Mark Thompson Show.
I love my Shadow Stevens.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Good show.
All the time. Bye-bye.
Until tomorrow.